Live in the studio is Mohamad Elmasry, a Professor of Media Studies at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. So a warm welcome into the studio. What do you make of this piece?
Well, it's certainly fragile to say the least. I mean, you could make an argument that there really isn't a ceasefire. Since the start of the ceasefire, less than 3 weeks ago, Israel's killed a couple of hundred people. A lot of it has been made of that, and rightly so. But less is being made of the fact that Israel is committing other violations on a daily basis. They're not allowing in anywhere near the number of required aid trucks. They're only allowing in a fraction of what they promised they'd allow in. They're also not returning Palestinian bodies at the ratio that is required by the Trump 20-point plan. And a lot of the bodies that are being returned to Gaza not only show signs of torture, but they show signs of organ theft. They're missing organs, they're missing eyes, they're missing corneas, and so on and so forth. So if Israel doesn't want a ceasefire, if they view this as a one-sided ceasefire where Hamas has to stop firing but they don't, then certainly there are going to be challenges going forward.
And you mentioned Trump and this 20-point plan. So he says that the ceasefire is still strong, while mediator Qatar is expressing frustration at the whole thing. Mediators are still looking for this phase 2. Is that sort of a reality now? Do you think we'll ever get there?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, phase 2 is very complicated, right? You're going to now get into issues of disarming Hamas, which is extremely difficult given that Israel proposes basically to stay the occupying force in Gaza, that it regularly attacks Palestinians, and also that they arm Palestinian gangs. So the idea, from the Hamas perspective, the idea of disarming just seems kind of untenable. There's also the mechanism. How are you going to disarm Hamas and all the other Palestinian resistance groups? So that's a complicating factor. The issue of Palestinian governance is extremely difficult. So the Trump plan, it was a plan about that initial stage. That was the agreement, the captive exchange and the ending of the hostilities. But beyond that, it's very vague. Mechanisms aren't in place. Timelines aren't in place. And so I have my doubts about whether we're going to get there.
And from the Israeli side of the equation, they want these hostage bodies back. What's going on there?
Well, I think Israel knew from the start that this was going to be very difficult, right? They turned Gaza into what Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, calls a demolition site. So it seems disingenuous, at least to me, to turn Gaza into a demolition site and then demand that all of these bodies are turned over in short order. One of the things that I think hasn't gotten enough play, and I mentioned this the other day on TRT World, is that the Trump 20-point plan included an addendum. There were actually multiple addendums. But in one of the addendums, it says that Hamas would do what it can within 72 hours to try to provide information about the dead bodies, the remains. So there was no promise, certainly there was no guarantee that Hamas would be able to whip up these remains in short order.
And can I talk about your role as well, because you work with media studies. How important has social media been? Because that's where we've got most of the visuals from, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've done a bunch of studies now over the past 2 years on war coverage. Western media coverage, mainstream Western media coverage, continues to be very pro-Israel. It's very sympathetic to Israel on a number of metrics. However, global public opinion has changed it's turned against Israel. And there's been a very dramatic shift. They've lost a lot of global standing. And I think the reason why is because of social media. Social media doesn't operate according to the same logics of mainstream news organizations necessarily, right? And so people are exposed to a lot of what's happening in Gaza through social media sites. And remember that the Israelis themselves have been using social media sites like TikTok and others to post videos of their atrocity crimes in Gaza. And I think that has helped really shift the equation significantly.
And what do you make about the lack of international reporters allowed into Gaza?
Well, it's a systematic plan. I mean, Israel knew what it was going to do on October 7th. I mean, they made their intentions pretty clear, and from that, starting point, you can't just allow journalists in. So they knew they were going in with a kind of genocidal intent, and so they moved on the media very, very quickly. They promised Agence France Presse and Reuters that they would not allow their journalists in, and that they would not give them protection if they did end up in Gaza. And then during ceasefire negotiations, Israel was very upfront about the fact that they would not want any journalists in. So it's been a complete news kind of blockade, and I don't think that's gotten enough attention, nor has the fact that Israel has killed more than 250 media workers. This has been the deadliest conflict for media workers in the history of the world.
Yeah, Mohamad, thank you so very much for coming into the studio. We appreciate that. A professor of media studies at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies.
Thank you.